Welcome to Season 5 of SheVentures. I am your host, Doria Lavanino. SheVentures is a podcast about women and their work and life pivots. I believe in the power of storytelling. I also believe that if you change one woman's life, you start to change a family or a community. Our mission is to elevate the diverse stories of everyday women in their words. One promise, no mansplaining ever. Sit back, listen, and hit subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us at SheVenturesPodcast.com. She is an Emmy-award-winning anchor, a Telly-award-winning show host, and a podcaster who took her paralyzing fear of public speaking, conquered it, and enjoyed a multi-decade career in television broadcast journalism. She pivoted 4 years ago to her namesake company, where she teaches small business owners and corporate execs alike how to maximize, in her words, their video IQ. If you don't embrace video today as a small business owner, you're likely dead in the water. Here today to talk about her journey and provide us with tips is Kerry Barrett. Kerry, welcome to SheVentures.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to meet and chat with you and your audience.
Absolutely. And Kerry's being very polite because we had a half an hour of tech disaster as I was trying to get this Emmy Award winning woman to be able to hear me, and it was on my end, and she's been so professional. So thank you.
Listen, let me tell you, if anybody was able to see what was going on behind the scenes in the TV news industry, this is child's play. It is sometimes a disaster of epic proportions. So I've been there, no sweat, and I am excited to be here and chatting with you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And 2 decades as a broadcast journalist, yet you had a paralyzing fear of public speaking. How bad was it for you?
Back of the room, puddle of my own vomit, hyperventilating bad.
Really?
Yeah. And it goes way back to my childhood. I mean, I was a person who didn't even want to get up to give like a book report in a group setting in front of a small group of friends. Just terrified. Didn't even like to sneeze in class lest somebody sees that I'm there and happens to notice me. I actually started out in college as a pre-veterinary medicine major. I love animals, but mostly because I would be working more with animals than people. And not that I dislike people, I just afraid to speak to them. And I was about 1.5 years 2 years in when I realized the one thing that I got along with worse than speaking in public was organic chemistry. And that's what started the change.
I feel you there. Organic chemistry destroyed my interest in nursing. Yes.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so you decided then to pivot to something that terrified you. What was it that made you do that?
I'm going to share with you because it was sort of just, I stumbled upon it. So I took 1.5 years off because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And my friends are starting to graduate and I was left behind. My school, Clemson, a great animal science program, they had just launched a communications program and it was very, very broad. It was business communications and speech pathology and PR and marketing, a little bit of journal. It was like the whole 9 yards. And I was like, well, certainly I will find something that I can make a living with in this space. Bonus number 1. Bonus number 2, no organic chemistry. Bonus number 3, sort of, I'm going to have to take 2 public speaking classes. I knew intellectually that issue, not just the fear, but also the lack of skills was going to hinder me as I moved forward. But the way that I stumbled into journalism was because I had taken 1.5 years off, I was trying to jam my schedule full of tons of credit hours to make up for that, or to begin to make up for that lost time. And so, your full load was 12. I was taking 24 and I wanted to figure out how to jam 3 more credit hours into my schedule. But I'm in class Monday through Friday from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. The only way that I could do that was to get an internship and to try and find an internship that worked outside of regular business hours. well, news is a 24/7 industry. And
That
so
is true.
there was a local TV station, the NBC affiliate in Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina, WYFF.
Oh, yeah.
And I got an internship working the evening news and on the weekends.
You were actually on air?
Not on air. I was an intern. Nobody would ever put an intern on the air.
That's what I was like, wow.
Well, unless they're in dire straits. No. But I was out with reporters and I saw, how the news is put together. And I love the storytelling. And I've always loved storytelling. I grew up overseas. I'm very interested in learning about different backgrounds and cultures and ways of life and all that stuff. I'd always had that interest, but I hadn't articulated it into a career. So it all seemed to fit together. So then after I realized I love the news industry and the storytelling, I had to figure out how to get good at speaking, not in front of a small group of 15, but live on a camera in front of potentially millions with all of the errors out there. And trust me, there are errors every day. It was a process. That was the part that I had to still figure out is how was I going to get not just good, but good enough that somebody was going to pay me to do it.
Yes. Do you consider yourself an introvert?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Me
100%.
Too.
It's one of the reasons I like video as a business owner because, well, it doesn't entirely prevent me or keep me out of in-person networking, which is also important to build, your centers of influence and all that other stuff. But creating video, if you understand how to do it, is actually great for introverts because all of those things that you're worried about, you can do them over and over again until you get them right on camera. Now, I don't suggest overthinking yourself on camera and doing 55 takes, which must have been guilty of doing. Once you get a certain level of skill and confidence, more than 2 or 3 takes, you're overthinking it. But my point is, it allows you as an introvert to put yourself out there without being the one who enters the room and then sort of stands against the wall because you feel awkward and you don't know how to talk to people.
So you overcame it. And it was through the classes, I would assume, and then through professional experience and watching others do it. Was there anything else that contributed to overcoming your fear?
I would say much less the classes. The classes were almost useless in helping me overcome it. They maybe desensitized me a little bit to the butterflies and the profuse sweating and all of that other stuff. But in terms
dry
of
mouth.
actually, the whole nine, the vomit bag, the thing that actually made me improve was I had to be on air every single day, even if it was just for 3 minutes and it was live. I had no choice. I couldn't go into my boss and be like, I'm sort of nervous today. I don't feel like doing this, Okay, Kerry, bye. There's like 10,000 other people who'd like this job.
Who will.
So you have to do it. Every day I did it I didn't always anchor a full show. Sometimes I was reporting on one story and it was 2 or 3 minutes. Sometimes it was half an hour. I would say the real change after I began to establish and grow a base set of skills and strategies and tactics and all that stuff was I got comfortable with 2 things. I got comfortable with just winging it because that's what you have to do when you're doing breaking news and you cannot overthink it. And then number 2 was I realized that no matter what happened, whether my mic went out or my co-anchor had a coughing fit and had to leave the set or the prompter shut down or any number of disastrous things I mentioned that are always going on behind the scenes.
Yes.
Once I realized that I could, in fact, navigate them all, might not be pretty, but I would come out on the other side standing.
Yes.
That's when everything changed. My confidence changed, my ability to show up and build my own sort of brand in the news industry, which is how I advanced from that tiny little Texas town where I started out to New York City at NBC. I've fallen on those sort of skills and confidence to build my own business as well. So the skills were transferable from one to the other.
Would you say that there are, generally speaking, public speaking challenges that are more prevalent with women?
Yeah. And I think it is changing, but for a long time, and I hate to paint with a broad brush. And so I say this with a generalized understanding that this is not applicable to everybody. Not everybody acts in this way. Not everybody understands it in this way, but I'll share a story that illustrates exactly what I'm talking about. There was a study that came out by the National Institute of Atmospheric Science. And it was relatively recent. I believe it was 2016. We've made some progress since then. So I'm going to put that little underscore there. But they did a study on what was the most prevalent factor that, what's the word I'm looking for? What was the best predictor of the death toll in a hurricane? That's what I'm trying to say. What was that element that was the best predictor of a death toll in a hurricane? And it didn't have anything to do with population, didn't have anything to do with the size of the storm. What it had to do with was the name of the hurricane. And what they found was that hurricanes that had a female gendered name had a higher death toll. And the reason was that people did not heed the evacuation warnings.
Oh, they didn't take it as seriously
as they did for male named hurricanes.
Oh, wow.
Now, I see that as something that is applicable to the way, again, we've made progress.
Of course.
Just not taken as seriously. And that can get up in your head. That can affect the way that you own the room or own the Zoom as it is now. And that set of, I don't know whether it's imposter syndrome or head trash or whatever it is, many of us over the years have internalized it. And I think that can get in the way. It doesn't mean that it has to stay in the way. It does not have to stay in the way.
Yes, absolutely.
And it doesn't mean that you won't ever be taken seriously, or in fact, that you're not being taken seriously now. Exactly. But that's a great story that I think is indicative of one of the unique challenges that women face.
I think it's so true. I've heard, after interviewing more than 100 women, imposter syndrome seems to be a common thread that we all have, to some degree, internalized and had to find a way to reckon with to get where we need to be. So I completely understand that. So you worked, as you said, at various networks, small town, all the way to New York City. As a woman, what was it like working at these networks?
I mean, it had its challenges. In some cases, it's very much like the morning show, the TV on, or the show rather, on Apple TV. And in other ways, there's a little bit of exaggeration there as well. I mean, I will tell you that I've been asked to change my hair color and change my name and show more skin. Don't show more skin. Don't wear this color. Actually do wear that. And it varies. It's very subjective. You know, technically you do have to have a performance issue in order to be let go. But at the end of the day, if you have a new boss comes in and he doesn't like brown hair and he wants a blonde, he doesn't have to, or she doesn't have to dig very far to find a reason to let you go. And, you know, your contract is up and he wants to bring in his own person who happens to be a blonde or a brunette or a redhead or whatever. And so that stuff is still very well and prevalent. Yeah.
Did you see it happening to men as well?
I didn't. It doesn't mean that it didn't. That didn't. Right. I never heard a man complain about that, but I did do an interesting sort of social experiment with one of my co-anchors, and he wore the exact same suit and occasionally would change up the shirt and tie for like 4 months. Nobody said a word to him. No viewer emails, no tweets, no boss asking why he was wearing the same outfit day in and day out. I did the same thing. And it didn't take more than a week before the emails were flooding and the tweets were coming in. And there is a different standard. It just is.
I've also noticed, because I do watch BBC and I watch Sky News because I like to get some international news as well. And I've noticed that their presenters look a lot more like real people. Whereas in America, I feel that we have this certain aesthetic that we're going for. Do you feel that that's also true in corporate America today?
The aesthetic issue?
Yes.
That is a very good question. I haven't been in the corporate or small business world nearly as long as I was in the news industry. I've been in this for 3.5 years or so. I was in the news industry for 2 decades. I would say that there is a general different set of standards that women are held accountable. I will tell you, though, I do think since the pandemic hit, especially, that those standards are beginning to recede, meaning we've gotten used to showing up in our pajamas, home offices or kitchens or wherever the heck that it is. And there's been a little bit of, for better or worse, blending of those boundaries. And so I do think that some of those aesthetic parameters that we set up for ourselves or that were set for us are beginning to recede. They're not entirely gone. And it depends a little bit on the industry as well. If you're in something that's very buttoned up, finance, insurance, the set of standards are quite different than if you are in entertainment
fashion,
or,
right.
Lifestyle PR, for example.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. You pivoted. You decided 3.5 years ago to become an entrepreneur and create Kerry Barrett Consulting. What went into your decision to do that?
Well, I actually just changed my name. It's Kerry Barrett Incorporated now.
Okay.
And that's all right. That's all right. It's a very recent change. And I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to mention that. What precipitated that change? Many things. I loved morning news. I still love morning news. The spontaneity, the familiarity with the audience. It's very habitual for the audience. The camaraderie you experience with everybody who is up also at 0 dark 30 it's very tight-knit group, generally speaking.
What time did you wake up?
12:30 a.m.
Really? Oh my goodness.
It was a lengthy process in hair and makeup to make it look like I had not, in fact, been wrestling with a bag of hammers all night. Because
right.
That's what I looked and felt like when I walked through the doors at 30 Rock.
Oh.
It was a very tough. I have 3 young kids. I was napping for a couple of hours when I got home, then, up, school activities, homework,
right. You wanted to spend time with your kids.
All that other stuff. And then napping for a few more hours after they went to bed. And I was a disaster. I was
imagine.
Marriage on the rocks, no social life. All I could muster was like drooling on the couch watching TV, which is not at all how I anticipated being a mom. At some point, I knew that it was time to go. My contract was up. And I had built no runway. I had no idea what it was that I was going to do. I assumed I would go into PR if I ever left the news industry, because that's what so many people do. And it was out networking and just sort of, do I want to be in-house? Do I want to be at an agency? What sorts of companies and people do I want to work with? And I met with a woman who did PR and communications at one of the large law firms in New York City. And she said, you're nuts to think about going back into working for somebody. You have the skill set that you've built over 20 years. You have a story and the credibility to back it up.
Yes.
You need to take what you've learned and turn it into your own thing. And I was like, okay. So I went home and I told my husband I was going to start my own business. I fired up the LLC that night, and that's about as much thought went into it. And when I tell you that I had zero business knowledge, I truly mean I had zero business knowledge. I didn't have any idea what I was going to be doing exactly. I didn't have an offer. I'd go to a networking event because that's what you're supposed to do. Somebody would ask me, how are you going to scale? And I would be like, hold on a minute. Google, what does scale mean?
Right.
I don't know what deliverables means. I don't even know exactly what you're talking about when you say branding, P&L, KPI. I knew it's like learning to fly a plane with an instructor and a manual in a language you have no idea.
Right. So did you ask questions or did you kind of?
Oh gosh, yes. I was like, listen, I am, if I pretend that I know what I'm talking about, I am further away from my goal than I want to be. So I had to just jump in and ask questions, no matter how stupid they were. I remember I was at a networking event and we were all sort of going around. It was a workshop, really. We were going around the room and they were asking what our referral process was. I didn't know what a referral was.
Right.
So they're asking, like, do you pay for referrals? And they came around to me and they're like, what do you get when you have a referral? It was so brand new. I didn't even have referrals at that point. And I would be like, I just say, thank you very much.
Why would you know? Why would you know?
I think most people maybe go into business with a little more background than I had.
But
nevertheless, here I am.
Here you are. And you've grown your company. And so what would you say makes your company unique? Firstly, I love that you have experience in what you do, because I have seen this shift where everyone is all of a sudden an expert, a money expert, and whatever. And they have absolutely no background. Yeah, you actually do. And so that credibility is nice. But aside from that, how would you say you're different than your quote unquote competitors?
Well, I think one of the things, so I teach small business owners, coaches, consultants, solopreneurs, service providers, how to create compelling and effective DIY video for all the different stages of their funnel. So we talk a lot about social media, but if that's where your video strategy starts and ends, then you are cutting yourself off at the knees. There's 95% of the ways you can use video is entirely outside of social. It means video sales letters and videos on your landing page and emails and vlogs and video podcasts and live streams and webinars and video DMs on LinkedIn. I mean, I could go on, but my point is a lot of the programs that teach that sort of same thing, the one in which they all fall short on, that I've seen anyway, is that they don't teach the on-camera delivery, the skills, the tactics, the confidence. And I think that is, at least for my clients, that is the
essential
biggest stumbling block. Like, I'm afraid to even do all this other stuff because I am timid and awkward and boring and I don't know how to be on camera and I hate myself when I am. And I think it doesn't matter how much video you're creating if your ability to deliver on camera makes your audience awkward or that diminishes your credibility or your authority. Not only are you not doing yourself any favors, but you're not going to get people to watch from beginning to end. Your video is not going to lead them through your sales funnel. It's not going to nurture them on their customer journey. And so that's where a lot of them fall short. And I would say the other element that makes the way that I work a little bit different is that it's not just about social media. Like I said, a lot of them will teach you how to create reels for Instagram but you're missing out on so much of the bigger picture there.
I love that you say that because it is so true. And I've seen so many new products coming out that really are focused on video funnels. Are there any that you recommend?
Oh my gosh, there's a million. I mean, I like to create video sales letters. I think they're done well. They're extremely effective. You can use them for a product. You can use them for a lead magnet. There's a couple of different platforms that I like to use to create them. Camtasia is a great one. Wistia, which is technically it's a video marketing platform. You can host videos there just the way that you can on YouTube, but their analytics are very robust. And you can integrate them with your CRM. So you can automate responses based on people's watch behavior or where they are in your funnel. Those, Wistia, Camtasia, Loom is another great one. I mean, they're all different elements that you can incorporate into your video strategy, but those three in particular are amazing in my opinion.
They're game changers, it sounds like. What goes into assessing someone's video IQ?
The sort of tagline for the VIQ Academy, which stands for Video IQ, is, you know how you go to make a 2-minute video, except it takes 2 hours. You load yourself on camera and you don't know how to leverage it so it doesn't perform. This program fixes all of that. So it's everything from honing your audience to background to delivery to presentation and editing and shooting and distribution. But when I'm looking at somebody's on-camera delivery outside of strategy for distribution and that sort of thing, I call it MVPing your VIQ. And it's mindset, it's vocal variety, and it's physical performance. And I look at those elements. The camera is tricky in that it takes a 3D person, turns them into a 2D image, which is why angles and lines look weird. It's why you look like you're heavier than you are usually when you're in camera, because there's no dimension.
Yes.
And aside from no dimension, there's also no context outside of this little box that you're in. There's a lot that is lost on that communication. And then we get in our heads and we tend to sit stock still and we,
don't move.
Vocal range begins to diminish. I look at those three things first. When I talk about mindset, it's really one key conceptual difference. When I ask people, how many people do you think are watching your video? How big is your audience? They're like, I don't know. It depends on how many people are watching. And yes, that is true. Conceptually, it's not. You always have an audience of one, whether there's 1 million people watching you or no one watching you. It's always an audience of one. And it's a very similar concept to speaking from the stage. If you try and speak to everyone, you will speak to no one. So you're connecting with one person. It is an intimate conversation, and that person needs to feel like you're talking to them and to them only. So that's the key sort of mindset shift. And then we move into vocal variety, which is really using your voice the way you would in natural conversation, except slightly amplified. I mentioned that the camera diminishes and reduces. So you have to mitigate that. You have to account for that. Much the way if you were, and this is usually a little bit of an easier analogy or explanation to understand, visual maybe. The way that you would get up and speak on a stage during the Super Bowl in an entire live audience of, I don't know how many people, tens of thousands in front of you and millions around you, is quite different than the way that you would sit 3 feet across from somebody in a small, quiet conference room and have a similar conversation. The words could be exactly the same, but if you understand the difference in your environment, deliver those words differently. The same goes for being on camera. I will take that analogy and then I'll turn it into this one. So how does that understanding of stadium versus conference room apply to being on camera? I encourage people to think about it in this way. Let's say you're at a crowded restaurant and there's somebody who's seated at the same table as you, but they're 4 people away. What are the things and you're trying to have a conversation with them? What are the things that you do to try and make sure that what you're saying and communicating is understood and received? We usually do a couple of things. We project our voice a little bit more. We lean forward when we're excited or we're trying to show them nonverbally that this is cool. We probably amplify our facial expressions a little bit. Maybe we use our hands more often than we would, or we, really highlight this thing is important, or it's 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. For most people, it's about a 20-ish% increase. You want to replicate that sort of communication when you're speaking on camera, but also recognizing that there's one person on the other side of the lens that you're really trying to connect with. And it's bringing all those skills together that can get tricky and take practice.
Oh, absolutely. It must take a lot of practice. I can't even imagine. For me to go on video this season was a really big decision for me. So
is this your first season on video?
Yes, it is.
Yay, that's awesome.
Thank you. I just said, you know what? I'll give it a go.
And you have so many opportunities to use it when you have video for promotion and stuff. It's just, there's a lot more there. And you're already sitting down and doing the recording. You might as well flip on the camera.
Exactly. Why not? So you offer both personal consultations as well as courses, digital courses. I was just curious, if you're looking at your business as a pie chart, what would you say is your biggest earner? Is it your digital courses or is it your consulting, personal?
Up until maybe a year ago, it was one-on-one coaching, but I've made a deliberate shift to move that more into the digital programs. So the digital programs are, listen, I get it. We're all stressed out and busy and whatnot, but the digital programs are great because they're go at your own pace. Once you purchase, you have lifetime access, and you also have the ability to ask me questions, text questions within the platform. From that program, I have additional levels of support or ways to work together. It could be group coaching done virtually. It could be one-on-one coaching done virtually. It could be you need some of your videos edited, which is the first thing I suggest people outsource once they have a little bit of padding and they have some money to do so. Outsource the editing. Or perhaps it is you need some, I do keynote speaking and other sorts of training as well. So there's different ways to work together, but it's been a deliberate shift because I think people are, number one, cognizant of the fact that we may be moving into the R word right now at the time of this taping. And so giving somebody a lot of value at a price point that almost everybody can accommodate, and then offering them additional levels of support if they really want that help. I think that's the way that I know that I can make the most impact and help the most people at price points that are accessible to almost everybody.
It also scales yourself, right? Because there's only one of you, so you can then record yourself and thousands of people can then purchase. Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. You've given our audience, I think, a lot of do's on how to show up on camera. What would you say are 3 absolute do not do's?
3 absolute do not do's. Oh boy, 3 absolute do not do's. Well, it depends a little bit on who your audience is, but I'm going to give you something that is applicable for everybody.
Okay.
Showing up on camera. Very, very rarely do black and white work on camera. If you have a bad lighting situation, it's going to make it worse. Now, if you have, even when I was in the news industry and we had professional audio technicians and lighting people, and they would come in and they would adjust the lights for each person individually every time a new show started, they still asked us not to wear black and white because the iris,
it kind of pales.
Adjusting. Yeah. So I would suggest those two. Don't wear that. That's a big no, unless you have, unless you know what looks good on you, your lighting and your background. That's fine. Second biggest don't is look at the lens. Do not look down here. And I know, oh my gosh, I know it's hard.
It is hard.
But your audience's eye is right here. It's right at that little lens. We feel like we're losing some of those nonverbals because we're looking into the lens and we're not looking at the person's face.
Exactly.
Where I try and recoup some of that is when the person is talking, then I look down in the monitor and I try and draw whatever missed nonverbals.
Oh, interesting.
And so I actually practice. I'll give you one quick tip. One of the biggest challenges for people is that idea of looking in the lens and not looking elsewhere. I suggest practicing on your phone, but instead of practicing on this side where your camera is and your screen, practice on this side because you have to look into the lens that way. You're not distracted by what's on the screen. And so it just gets you used to talking into a lens. And I think the third biggest no-no is to practice inconsistently. And I know that is sort of boring, but I will tell you from my own experience, it is hands down the best way to get as good as you can as quickly as possible. That and live stream, which I realize most people don't want to jump into just yet, but live is really good for that. Practicing a little bit each day, even if it's just 30 seconds, open up your phone and talk about something to this lens, whether it's your first cup of coffee or the fact that you have a podcast that you're doing with the fabulous Doria or whatever it is, talk about it. Do that for 30 days. Pick one thing to work on, whether it's eye contact or energy or vocal variety. Just pick that one thing and then look at the difference between beginning to end. And then once you feel like you have your arms around that particular challenge or tactic or strategy or skill, move on to the next one. Because if you try and do all the things at once, you'll do none of the things. Impossible. So my third biggest no-no is inconsistent practice and trying to fix everything at once. You won't see the change and you'll get disillusioned and you'll shut down.
I love that. And it makes so much sense, especially if you're an introvert, because you're your own worst critic, right?
Oh yeah.
what has been we're almost winding down here, but I just wanted to ask, what is your biggest win and your biggest challenge as a female entrepreneur?
Biggest challenge is not to catastrophize everything. I catastrophize everything. I get a call from a client or a text message, let's talk. And I immediately assume I'm being fired. I've never been fired, but I catastrophize everything. And that's probably for a therapist one day.
When you have time.
Yeah, exactly. I have tons of that. That is my biggest challenge. And I would say I went through a huge challenge I guess it was about a year and a half ago now. I had a launch that was a flop for a number of reasons. The product wasn't bad. It was a bad fit it didn't work. I really needed a win after that in order to get back in the saddle. And I had a huge corporate win that came right after that. And I realized, okay, Kerry, you don't suck that bad.
No, you definitely do not suck.
But I would tell you this, that win and the way that it changed my perspective was great, but I also became very aware of how tied I was to external events. I'm riding the ups and downs rather than staying in the center and riding it out. Don't believe your good press and don't believe your bad press.
Absolutely. Just keep going. Yep. Like take the feedback, obviously, for what it's worth, right? Because we all grow from that. Mm-hmm. And before you tell listeners where they can find out more about you, I always like to ask women, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh my gosh, stop caring what everybody thinks.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I can't. That's it. Nobody is paying any attention to you because they're all in their own heads and worrying what everybody thinks about them. If I knew that way back when, I don't know where I'd be now.
Yeah, I understand that completely. With 2 teenage daughters, believe me.
Oh boy.
Oh. Yeah. So where can listeners learn more about you?
You can go to LinkedIn, you can search Kerry Barrett. You can go to Instagram. It is at Care, K-E-R, Barrett. Or you can go to my website, which is kerrybarrett.com.
It has been such a pleasure speaking with you today.
Lovely speaking with you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you. This was amazing.
You've been listening to SheVentures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.